I'm Michael, and welcome to Beyond the Screenplay is What We're Watching, our podcast where we watch a television series week by week. Today we're talking about The Last of Us, Season 2, created by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, specifically Episode 2, titled Through the Valley, available on HBO Max. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Arand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
All right. That's one less spoiler we have to tiptoe around. So this was quite the episode. Those of us that have played the game, I think we're bracing ourselves for it and wondering for a long time when it was going to happen. It happened, but a lot of other stuff happened in this episode too. We got to spend some time with Ellie and her friends, kind of meet them a bit more. And then there was a Game of Thrones White Walker attack on the city that is not
Helm's Deep. Come on, let's a little bit of both, right?
Yeah, sure, a little bit of both. But that was really interesting. And then, of course, we have killing your protagonist to set up a character arc of lots of other people, introduce thematic things, and it's a hell of a choice that they made. I want to talk about the game, and I want to talk about how we're feeling about it in the show. But I want to hear from you, Trisha, as someone who has not played the game. I'm just so curious. Did you know this was coming? And what is your reaction as a TV viewer of this?
Yeah, mixed feelings. I had a suspicion it was coming. I don't think any of you guys tipped me off in any way, other than I had a sense that Ellie was the protagonist of the second game. And I knew that Abby is a big character in the second game as well. And so I was ready for some kind of a handoff. So I sort of suspected it might be this kind of a handoff. On the other hand, the marketing of this season of television has certainly desired to mislead you about who your protagonist is.
Well, that is also in line with the game.
Well, again, if it's not broken, don't fix it. It's really the name of the game. But I will say, I do suspect we haven't seen the end of Joel in the season. I think we'll be getting some lengthy flashbacks.
Definitely.
So I think it's not like he is exiting the show at this point. So I'm not necessarily concerned about that. I think he'll be probably in most of the next few episodes, at least. So yeah, but I was very stunned. I did think, and we can get to this later more, but character deaths and the way that they unfold are really important. Like, it's not just that a character dies, it's how they die and why they die. Like, it would mean something thematically completely different if Joel, sacrifices himself to save Ellie to the horde of zombies. That would mean something very different than what this death means, right? And so the actual nature of death in drama and the details of how it unfolds are essential for reading the death thematically, and in terms of character arc. And so I would love to talk about that some more. I think it's really fascinating exactly how it unfolds for Joel in this episode. And no one else? I mean, I guess like a few other people, but I was kind of expecting more. There are many citizens of Jackson, Wyoming that don't make it out of here, but none that I have ever met or care about. So it's fascinating where there was a point in the middle of the episode, I was like, I don't know how the game unfolds, but like this could be the end of Jackson. As far as I know, like this could be it. Jackson Hole's done. Like this could be all done. Because I know that I know and or suspect that Ellie is not going to spend the whole season hanging around in this city. So I assume something is going to go horribly awry here. So it could be the end of the city, but it turned out that was not the case. And so I don't know. I just think it's really interesting how it all was handled. It also has been brought to my attention on the Discord. That's the attack on Jackson Hole by the horde of frozen zombie mushrooms. That's new for the TV series, which I think is a really bold choice. And I'm excited to hear you all react to that.
Yeah. The Discord, of course, being the Beyond Screenplay Discord, where we're also chatting and getting to hear week by week, day by day, all of you guys talk about it.
Lots going on over there.
Really fun. Yeah. Brian, I'm going to go to you. Tell me about your thoughts on this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely bracing myself for when this was going to happen. It is certainly an incident that incites in many ways. And, you know, I coming into the season, I was like, it could happen in episode 1. It could happen in episode 5. Like, I have no idea. Especially if we're going to get to know Jackson more and spend more time, you know, with these characters. And then the way episode 1 went, I was like, yeah, it's going to be episode 2. So, and I was really just hoping they followed through with it, and it wasn't like a cut before the last 5 minutes of that scene, and that's how the next episode opens, or then the next episode's like a flashback or whatever. I was like, look, if we're doing it, just do it. And I'm really glad that was how this episode at least ended. And yeah, there's, you know, a lot to talk about with this choice and what it means. But in terms of my own takeaway, I continue to think that the changes that were made from the game are interesting and smart. In the game, Joel is with Tommy when they get attacked, and Ellie is with Dina. And having Dina be with Joel is interesting because it makes it a little more personal for her. Whereas, as I mentioned last week, in the game, they basically don't really talk. Like, they know each other, but they don't really have any time together. And then to have Tommy be sort of the face of Jackson, you know, Tommy and Maria, of course. And then you give us more time. You give Tommy more to do. You give us more time in Jackson. You give us some fun zombie action, which I just thought that was all really well executed. I just had a really good time watching that whole, as I said before, I love battle sequences where I can like see where things are and like what the tactics are and everything like that. I'm just like, yes, this is great. And then yeah, we'll get into it more, you know, today and over the next episodes and stuff. But it's a very bold choice, but it's also, when you end the first game / season the way you do, you can't say there are no consequences to this, you know, and this is a big one. And now we have this sort of spiraling, you know, never-ending cycle of revenge that we're seeing start to kind of unfold here. And I think it's interesting. It's a very interesting way to start, especially the second game, where you've spent 9-10 years since the first game being like, these are my people, you know, and then now one of them is not. So, you know, and you go from there. But I'm just really looking forward to seeing how this story continues to unfold, how it is executed.
Yeah, totally. Alex, what about you?
I had a very interesting perspective last night because my mom was in town visiting, and
mine too.
And yeah, my mom has not played the game. She had no idea what was going to happen, and it was really interesting watching her reaction because she was like, "Wait, what? He's not in the show anymore?" And it was just kind of this feeling of betrayal. I could see, and I was feeling it too, honestly, because I feel like this season, first with the marketing, Trisha, as you said, you know. Joel's all over the trailers. And in the first episode, it's almost making it extra painful because there's so much good character setup for Joel and Ellie in the first episode. If you are an innocent viewer coming to this season, you're like, okay, great. There's so much to do here with Joel and Ellie. Like, there's the therapy session. We've got all these unspoken things between them. And so it really is a punch to the gut to have this happen so early, so quickly. And I do think, like the game, we are going to get flashbacks that do fill out their story, that kind of gives some closure for that. But right now, if you don't know that, I don't know. I think I would feel cheated if I didn't have that context of the larger game and the fact that we will have access to flashbacks and get to kind of close out their story a bit more. So she was just really upset. She was just kind of like, that was awful and upsetting, and like, what is this show anymore? And which is a reaction a lot of people had to the game as well. And so it's a really interesting thing. And it harkens back to another HBO mega hit, Game of Thrones. The Red Wedding is a really analogous thing to this, where book readers knew the Red Wedding was coming. Innocent TV viewers did not know. And then when you see, spoiler alert, the slaughtering of most of the Stark family, you're just like, oh, those were the good guys. That's who I was rooting for. What even is this show anymore? And then it continues.
Well, even more analogous, the first season has a pretty clear protagonist who, spoilers for Game of Thrones, is not the protagonist in the later seasons.
I
know about that. You don't have to. Don't worry about
season
it.
one.
Hopefully, there's more than just you listening.
Yeah, season 1 did the big thing first, but then Red Wedding was kind of like, oh, you can also do that? What?
Right.
Like, where is even? We're losing all the characters. Anyway, and so it puts the audience in a really uncomfortable place and a really kind of angry place, and it's a big risk to take with your game, with a TV show, and I am looking forward to seeing how they pay it off this season to make this sacrifice worth it, this inciting incident worth it.
Right.
And the game Last of Us Part 2, I felt things very deeply during it, and a lot of the things I felt I didn't like feeling, but it made me feel. And there's another conversation to be had too about art and film, TV, making us feel things. And is there a certain point where it's like, you know what? I don't want to feel this anymore. This is too much, actually. And I think Joel's death scene is one of those scenes that's just like, it's right there on the edge of like, you are pushing this just to the edge with the torture and the violence and just how awful it all is. And The Last of Us Part 2 is definitely playing in that territory with just like, this world is brutal, and things do not happen always for a clear reason, or there's not a clear closure. It's just really brutal, and people are left with these bad feelings. But the themes it is exploring kind of all have to do with that. So it is all for a reason. It just feels really icky.
Right. Well, that's the thing is I think like, what is the function of a character death, of anything like that, right? And of course, you can answer that question and you can argue about whether that was needed to serve that function. But also the other side of it is like, yes, it has a function, but one, you're going to make people feel a certain way that may or may not be what you intended. It may or may not be what they want from the show. And two, if a character is part of the reason why people love your show, like that character's just not there anymore, right? Like, so then that becomes a big deal too, because it's like, I just think it is like something people don't appreciate, where they're like, oh, we're really going to get him with this. And it's like, right, but that character was why I watched your show. So now I don't care anymore, because so there is a point at which you're just like, well, then now it's just pointless. It's meaningless. I don't care anymore. Right. So it's a very, very fine line.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel really good about this, and I'm really excited about the season, and I want to dive into all of this in depth. Before we do, just a reminder for people to make sure you don't miss an episode. Like and subscribe on YouTube, or head to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. Those are the places that we will be releasing these episodes. If you become a supporter on Patreon, then you get access to the Discord, so you can be part of these conversations that are happening there. Yeah, this material is so thematically rich, and I am finding in this episode anyway that I'm able to engage with it in a more pleasurable way than I did in the game. And that's not to say that the game wasn't good or wasn't effective. To your point, Alex, it might be like too good and too effective when you are embodying the characters that are doing this thing. And what the game does, and this is tricky to navigate because of the nonlinear aspect of the game, we don't want to accidentally like give spoilers for things that might happen later in the show or something. So I'll navigate this carefully. But a lot of what we saw in this episode with Abby going out, looking out and then finding Joel, like you play as Abby for those sections in the game. And it's creating a sort of empathy with like, oh, I am Abby now as the player in this game. And that's how you think about embodying those characters. When we did our interview with Neil Druckmann for our Lessons from the Screenplay video on The Last of Us, he talked about that very explicitly, of like using the idea of you embodying and controlling the character to create empathy, and then the story kind of uses that against you and to evoke all these emotions. And I feel like the TV show is doing doing that also. Like, I think we get to be with Abby. This episode opens with this kind of dream sequence, so we kind of understand her trauma. We see her with her friend. She's making a plan. It's like annoying that she's in this revenge situation, but then she rolls down a hill and finds herself standing on a bunch of frozen zombies. And for that whole sequence, you're sort of with her, and it's a very visceral sequence. Like, it's very stressful watching them come against like the fence, and it's crashing in, and she's crawling and crawling, and you're like, oh my God, I want you to get away. And so like I anyway found myself rooting for Abby to survive and get away, even knowing what was about to happen. And then to what you brought up earlier, Trisha, character deaths and how they unfold, the back and forths and the twists and turns of how this all plays out is really important, because Abby's going to die and Joel saves her life. And like, that is, I think, a really critical part of bringing to the forefront this kind of idea of violence and revenge and who's like worth killing or not. And there were so many back and forths where he saves Abby. Abby kind of saves him and Dina from dying to the zombies. But then she enacts this terrible torture and murder. And it's constructed such that, Ellie is there and sees it all happen. Like, it's just a very well orchestrated character death to bring to the forefront all of these themes about revenge and cycles of violence, and make you empathize or at least understand kind of where everybody's coming from. And I feel like that was done really well in the game, and I feel like this episode did it really well for TV too.
Mm-hmm.
I largely agree. Not knowing exactly the details of how it unfolds in the game, I'm curious about the adaptation. And there are some elements where I'm like, well, that's probably from the game. These golf clubs, I don't feel like they just made that up for TV.
Infamous golf club.
Yeah, but there are other things where I'm just like, you mentioned that it was Tommy that was supposed to be with him, exactly how that unfolds. The horde of zombies, if they're new, I assume the sequence you're mentioning, which I thought was really cleverly imagined and executed, with her running from the zombies, and then she's in that like treatment plant thing or mine, I guess, or what it is. And, they're coming, the fence, the way that they like press down like onto.
That is straight out of the game. Like, even the angle and everything.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, it all works super well to like put you in her position, and in addition to being very tense and thrilling. So like all of that I think works really well. There were some things where I was just like, I kind of wish I had a little more. So I don't know when it in the game, but the opening dream sequence, where she's talking to herself. I wonder if I had known then it was her father, if it would have changed my view of her earlier. Because in that sequence, her younger self or her older self says to her younger self, don't go in there. He's dead. His brains are on the floor, blah, blah, blah. Without knowing the details, I'm assuming it's a friend, a romantic partner, maybe. I don't immediately assume father. And the father piece is crucial for the parallels, right? With Ellie and Joel. We need that piece. I need that piece. I need to know it's her dad. And I need to know that he was the doctor I saw. I remember seeing that doctor, but because the flashback or the dream sequence doesn't tell that to me, I'm left putting it together later when she delivers it in monologue, which is a much less powerful time to learn that information, I think. And so I wish that I had known that going into the episode of, it was her father. I feel like potentially it was hinted at in a way I could have gotten in the last episode with the crosses and everything. But then again, maybe not, because I didn't. So I do wonder about maybe the execution there could have been finessed for me to be even more on board with Abby before she enacts this violence. The same thing with her friends. They don't mean anything to me. And I feel like they could, or their
Yeah.
dynamic could bring another interesting counterpoint other than the medical officer who doesn't want any part of any of this, who I really like. But other than that, I feel like these characters aren't giving much in terms of creating layers to Abby's actions. Like, how is what she's doing here not just affecting Joel and not just affecting Ellie and not just affecting me, right? And all the other people that know these two characters, the violence is being enacted upon them. But the people who are ostensibly on Abby's side, what is the violence doing to them? Or how is it interacting with their relationship with her or their view of her? I get some hints at that, but because I feel like, broadly speaking, those characters are underdeveloped, they still feel underutilized in the death sequence. And so they're just kind of standing there going like, we don't like this, but we're not saying anything. As a unit, there's like 4 or 5 of them, and none of them as a unit are saying anything. And that feels like they don't really have agency when they could.
What's really interesting is that the game provides you even less context about her by this point.
Oh, fascinating.
So
Way
you,
less,
you
yeah.
really are kind of almost, you do embody her, you play as her for a brief period, but it's a mystery. It's like, who is this person? Who am I playing as? What is she doing here? What's going on? And you don't know about her dad. You don't know about any of that. You just find out she's here to kill Joel. And so the show is kind of splitting the difference, where there is still information
Interesting.
withheld, but they are providing more context at this point than the game does. So it's an interesting balance they're striking here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big choice to have the season open with her being like, his name is Joel, I'm going to kill him. It would just being like, oh, okay, you are just telling us right away, as opposed to, as Alex was saying in the game, it's just, here's this villain character, they did this, I don't know why they did this, and then slowly the game kind of reveals, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess, like, you know, you had a pretty, you know, we have here, something I want to talk about a lot this season is what I like to call protagonist brain, which is here's your protagonist, you're supposed to root for them and empathize with them, and anybody who stands in their way is against them, right? And who do we have here now? We have 2 young women who had their father figures taken away from them and are out for revenge. Very similar stories, right? One of them is some rando character we've never met before. We don't know who they are. We don't care. And the other one is someone who in the game has been your 2 people for 10 years, and in the show has been, you know, your person since for a season and an episode now. So we're instantly kind of trained to be like, you know, this is our protagonist, this is our antagonist, this is our good guy, this is our bad guy, right? And as it's already becoming clear, and I think giving Abby a little bit more backstory, like front loading some of her stuff, I think is trying to bring some of those themes to the forefront a little maybe sooner than the game does,
Right.
and sort of make us kind of investigate, like, how, you know, how are we going to feel about these characters going forward, knowing that they are both coming from very similar places, but one is our hero and the other is our villain, for lack of a better word, right? Sure. You know, and again, that's where protagonist and antagonist don't mean the same as hero and villain or good guy and bad guy. It just means who you're used to focusing on and then who is standing in their way. We've talked about this with like Skylar White or something, right? Where it's just like, that person's in the way of the protagonist, therefore they're a bad person. It's like, well, is the protagonist actually a good person? Let's talk about that, right? So I think there's gonna be a lot to investigate that I really want to come back to on POV, you know, as Michael was saying, the game has you play as Abby, we are spending time with Abby, and how we're going to feel about everything as going forward.
Yeah. And I'm curious to see how these episodes play out, because again, there's a non-linear aspect to the storytelling that the show is already kind of doing its own take on, so it'll be tricky to know when we can talk about some of those comparisons, but it's going to be really interesting when we get to. And as you were saying, Brian, this idea of like seeding early Abby's objective, like first scene, we meet this person, her goal is to kill Joel. I think it's a really smart decision. And we also talked in the last episode about how a lot of the goings on in Jackson and the game you kind of learn later through flashbacks front loading all of that, I think, gives important context and gives characters objectives. We know what they want. I don't know who Abby is, but I know what she's doing, and so I understand what she represents when she's on screen. And in a game, there are times when you don't need that as much, because like you are the player, you're there, you kind of, once you're on the sticks, you can be dropped into anybody, and there's a certain amount of like, well, I want to play the game and go forward or survive or whatever. Like you can kind of create your own objectives in a way that in a movie, if you just watch people walk around, it's not that fun. You need to know what they're doing and where they're going, some of that trajectory. And so I think that's a big decision, but I think a really smart one to kind of set up, as you were saying, Brent, from the beginning, the ingredients so that we can start thinking about what this means early on.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, really, really basic storytelling, that you just tell us the character's goal. Like, that's what when I teach story writing to elementary school students, we say it's cow, it's character, and on the other side is what they want, and in the middle is an obstacle, and that's the cow of a story. And it's pretty much gonna be compelling every time. Or like the classic is like a guy goes for milk. A guy needs some milk, but there's some problems along the way. And if we know why he wants the milk, and if it's a really compelling reason about why he wants the milk, it's going to be a great drama or whatever it is. Like, it's going to be a great story. And that's what this is.
Yeah, I agree. I think what we lose from the way that it's structured in the game, and it's when I say lose, I mean it's trade-off really, is in the game it feels so senseless because obviously we know what Joel did in the first game, but in the second game it's just like it happens really quickly. Like that scene, Joel's death scene is like maybe like 3 minutes long or something. It is not a long monologue about here's who I am and here's my backstory and here's what you did. We don't know. We don't really have any context about any of it. So you, especially as the player, when you are playing the game, you are just like, I need to go kill everyone now, and I think that like that puts you in that just, I can't believe this happened. It is so senseless kind of mindset. Whereas in the show, and then the game starts kind of building in the backstory and being like, oh, maybe it's not as cut and dry. Maybe it's not as simple as it was. But as everything you were just saying, what we gain from doing it this way is being like, we know who the characters are. We feel a little more oriented, I think, in a way that helps us see the bigger picture of the story that's being told here.
Yeah.
Something that I'm curious about too, because so much of what makes the game really interesting and just fascinating to study is the fact that it's using the game medium, the embodying of different characters at different times, to just really play with your emotions and your perspective. And so, yeah, you make assumptions about people, then you play as them. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, all my assumptions maybe are wrong. And, it's one thing to kind of be playing a game in which you kill people, to kind of confront the player with this senseless, awful thing, to try to invoke essentially rage in the player, and to try to make them feel what Ellie feels moving forward. I'm curious to see how well this works in a TV show, because and it's also just a me thing too. I've never been super compelled by revenge stories. I feel like my reaction to a violent death of a loved one would probably not be like to also become murderous, but probably just a lot of like horrible feelings, but not like I want to go now murder 100 people. But but like through a game that you're embodying a character that's going to go murder hundreds of people now. So it's just interesting because I think the game is playing with the form of games, which is you kill lots of NPCs in games, and playing with perspectives and like, oh my God, NPCs maybe are real people. Oh my God, what does that mean for the violence I'm enacting in this game? So there's a meta conversation about games happening in The Last of Us Part 2, the game. And I'm just curious to see how that is adapted to TV, because it's a different form. I'm not the one now enacting the violence or switching perspectives myself. I'm watching it happen on a screen passively. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a tall order to replicate the experiment that the game ran. And I'm curious to see if they're running a similar experiment or kind of trying to change it from an experiment into more of a, I don't know, like a traditional drama experience.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like the thing that's fascinating about The Last of Us as a TV show is that it is a translation of like something from one language to another. Like the language of video game storytelling is different from that of narrative cinematic storytelling. And I think what's impressive is that, to me anyway, so far that translation has been really, really strong and really, really good, and requires someone who's like fluent in both, like you understand both languages. And that's why, to your point, Alex, this is a tall order, and that's why I'm really excited to see like how this continues to go.
Yeah, and just like on a basic like TV episode writing level, like this understands itself so well. It is incredibly well structured.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, it's borrowing some of the smart but conventional writing of a bottle episode of a TV drama. My partner and I call these everybody's hot episodes, but they can also be everybody's cold episodes or storms a brewing episodes. And this is one of those. And like you recognize it right out of the gate if you know what you're looking for. Right, where it's like literally everyone walks into a scene going, "Oh boy, it's cold out there. Why is it so cold out there? If we go out there, we'll die in the cold." But it's what those episodes are doing. They're creating a pressure cooker on the characters. Right, there's a reason why extreme weather conditions are a useful tool for TV writing, because it is able to create this sort of unusual situation. It creates extremity in the characters where they take actions they wouldn't otherwise take to reveal things that they wouldn't otherwise reveal. And so this is doing that on sort of like a big picture macro scale. And then on a micro scale, it's really cleverly structuring, okay, here's kind of like the different elements that have been set up in the previous episode. It's playing them out. It's escalating tension. It's colliding characters in interesting and unexpected ways. It's still doing more expository work for things to come, while it's also every scene is doing action in the moment where characters are entering scenes and departing scenes as different people in the moment. And then it's still building toward longer character arcs, and then things are ratcheting up and ratcheting up. So it's like, I love when, the scene with Abby running from like all of the zombies that she wakes up. Now they're set up in a little bit of a clumsy way. Like I wish they'd been set up in the last episode as being like, maybe they're hiding under the snow. Maybe there's 1,000 of them. I was like, maybe? What do you mean maybe? But it's still really impactful because we kind of have a hint that this could be. And then when the Helm's Deep kind of a way, they're like seeding in, like, I need the information about some of what the plan is, but not all of what the plan is. So like, I know when things are going right, but I can still know when things are going wrong. And I'm still curious to see the battle unfold because I don't know this plan about what these barrels are and like what all of these ramps and things are. Like, again, it's all just rock solid writing on a basic level, and then that it's able to execute on this higher level as an adaptation, and it's just really impressive.
I really liked the pacing of this episode, and the fact that the battle happened. Once the battle happened, I was like, oh, maybe the Joel thing isn't going to happen because now we're in a big battle scene right now, but somehow the pacing of it and the ebb and flow made that sequence fun and entertaining to watch, and also left room to build up for, the huge moment of Joel's death. And it didn't, to me, feel like anything was sacrificed in it. And it was a cool experience that we've called out before as a game player, not having any idea what is going on. Like you walk into the room, Jesse and Ellie come in, and Tommy's there giving the speech about like, here's what we're going to do in case they come in. And I'm like, they're spending a lot of time talking about this thing that isn't going to happen. Like, what's, and they're showing these barrels, and I'm like, how is this going to possibly happen? And so it was cool to, that they were able to construct this episode, have it be surprising to people that are very familiar, and not detract from the major story beats, and seed in even like little things, like when Ellie and Jesse end up in the weed shop and we get a little bit more about Eugene and like what happened with Eugene. And there's a moment where Ellie realizes he was a firefly, and Jesse's like, yeah, too bad, like they couldn't be saved. And you see this look on her face of like, is that true? I don't like, what is that? Like, this episode had time for those tiny moments too that connect to this bigger context and world. And so I was just very impressed by the structure and pacing of it from start to finish.
Yeah, I feel like they've done such a great job at holding both audiences in mind at all times, the game players and the non-game players. Because for me, I could tell pretty quickly this was probably the Joel death episode. And I felt dread about that because it's not a good feeling to watch that scene again. And I was kind of relieved to have this really fun big battle scene to also get me through the episode that still culminated in this awful scene. But I didn't have to kind of stew in dread for an hour straight. I got to actually have this like enjoyable, big epic battle, thrilling experience. And it reminds me of, some of the tentpole huge episodes of Game of Thrones where there's a big battle, there's big spectacle, but also something on a very personal character level happens that changes everything, that is shocking, that you didn't expect. So I just think it's just really good TV, and it's really good taking care of both of your audiences and kind of letting both of them have a good time. And because I think I was listening to an interview with the creators, and they were also saying we didn't want to wait much longer to kill Joel because it is kind of excruciating if you're a game player, because you just you know it's coming. And so if we just drag it out for more episodes, it's like you're just waiting, and it's kind of like good.
It's also the start of the story, and it's like
it's the inciting incident.
It is the inciting incident.
Yeah.
Couple quick things. The first is that all of this is also very well acted too. Like, the acting has been consistently really strong to me. They gave Abby that really challenging monologue, which feels like it could be really overwrought and, like almost too much at times, and when coupled with all of this physical violence as well. And I thought, is it Caitlin Dever? Yes, her name? Dever. I thought she did a wonderful job with it. Really challenging scene, and I really enjoyed her performance. And the same with all the other actors. Young Mancino was really good in this, who plays Jesse. I
love him.
He's great.
He's such a good, like, there are certain actors who, like, you see and you're just like, oh yeah, you're Jesse. There are other ones where you're like, oh, you're the show's version of this, and like Jesse is one of the ones where I'm just like, yeah, that's Jesse.
Yeah, he's excellent in this episode as well, and I can't wait to see more from him in the season 2. I thought it was fascinating when you're going to kill a character, and this goes a little bit into the details of Joel's death, and I'm sure we'll return to it moving forward, but I thought it was interesting they didn't give Pedro Pascal more to do. Like, he's very passive, actually, in the way that this plays out. I've seen him murder a lot of people so far in this show, and I was like, you guys don't know who you caught here. Like, this is somebody who is very unhinged and very violent, and he could murder all of you. Or at the very least, put up a really good fight. And to my knowledge of the character, he has a good reason to put up a really good fight, right? But it's interesting, he kind of doesn't. And so I'm super curious when we start to see the events leading up to how Joel got into this room and what exactly has been happening with him and Ellie. I think it will solve a lot of the mystery for me of the way that Joel acts as the violence, as Abby is so slowly killing him.
I think there's also an interesting choice to pair him with Dina and have Dina in peril, because that's another reason for him to not fight. If Dina is at their mercy as well, his kind of protective father instincts kick in, and it's like, am I gonna get her killed in my trying to struggle here. But I agree with you, Trisha. There's also some subtext, and there's he even has a little head nod at one point in the scene when she confronts him with, there are some things that are just wrong, and he kind of basically agrees with her. And so I think, like you're saying, some of the flashbacks and the turmoil that's been going on with him and Ellie, it's going to be fleshed out the fact that he's been confronted with the things that he's done and essentially agrees that it's unforgivable.
And we see a little bit of that in the first episode in the therapy scene, right? Where she's like, what did you do? And he has this amazing wordless performance where you see him go through all this stuff, and then he just says, I saved her. And you can tell there's a lot of complicated feelings there. And I feel like it's the same things, the undercurrent for that moment too. So much to talk about.
I just have to say real quick, in the last week, I watched a new season of Black Mirror, which has a USS Callister sequel, and Martin Scorsese's Silence. And,
are you okay?
And this episode of Last of Us. Last night, I had a dream that Jesse Plemons kidnapped me in the post-apocalypse and wanted to hang me up by my skin, and it was not a pleasant dream. So I'm happy to be here with you guys.
You should pitch that to HBO.
Yeah.
They'd make that.
Go watch Hacks. The new season is great.
I did then watch Hacks. Yeah.
Started The Studio. That's pretty amusing. That's a fun
not
one.
anxiety-inducing at all.
Also, if anybody wants a beautiful post-apocalyptic drama, you can just go rewatch Station 11. Station 11 is still out there for you. And a positive take on humanity. It's not always fun to watch, but it's beautiful.
Also, another thing where I love the original and the adaptation.
Nice. So many good options. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, I'm glad we're here. The journey we're really here. And I'm very curious. I'm in the same place that I was in season 1 around this time, where the first episode of season 1, I was like, this is the game. Okay. Yeah. And then the second episode, I was like, oh, this is surprising. And then the third episode was totally different. So I'm really excited for the meat of this season, because I'm really not sure what's going to happen next. Even though I know all the things that could and should happen, I don't know what's going to happen next. And I'm very excited. Quick reminder to everyone, if you want to make sure that you don't miss an episode, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay YouTube, like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, or head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon, where you can become a patron and chat with us and share all your thoughts on the Discord. We're also going to be doing a deep dive retro recap on the first season in depth that'll be available to all Beyond the Screenplay patrons. So you'll get access to that as well.
I'm so excited. I haven't gotten to talk about the first season at all.
I know. It was so stressful seeing that you were watching it in the Slack. And I was like, I just want to ask Trisha everything. I want to hear her thoughts on all this. So we're going to do that. And that'll be available very soon for patrons of Beyond the Screenplay. We want to say a big thank you, as always, to the patrons that make this show possible. Thank you to our producer, Vince Major. Thank you to our editor, Mike Worth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tucker, and I'm joined today by Trisha Rand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Calleros. And we will see you next week for Season 2 of The Last of Us, Episode 3.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.